Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Rosie here, and I play Dead by Daylight, so you don't have to. One more on the trifecta today. I was gonna upload like a couple of these just throughout the week, but I don't know what my schedule will be like or how tired I'll be. I'm just gonna get them all done today. What the fuck ever, dude. The topic of the final video of the three we've made today is going to be on the perk oppression. Now, we started talking about oppression last video and some of the builds it can fit in. Some of this is going to be a little bit of repeat from that, but this video is going to be a little bit different because the last video was mostly about corrupt intervention. This is going to be mostly focused on oppression itself. Oppression is much better now. It's amazing. It's amazing what some little changes can actually do. But we're going to go ahead and talk about exactly why it's better now. Because a perk like this, the distinction, the arguments that you can make are oppression was always better than we gave it credit for. I don't think that's true because they have had to change it a little bit before it got to where it is now, and the fact that it was so outclassed by everything that was so much better than it in the game means that in that particular meta, it was never the best thing that you could run, especially with that cooldown it had in all those previous metas when the other perks were so much stronger. So, but that, and again, we'll reiterate some of those points there. So, when oppression launched, if you recall, the history of oppression was this. You kick a gem, and then it causes 3 additional gens to also start regressing with an 80-second cooldown. This, back in the day, was absolutely terrible. And because when this perk released, Ruin was already at 200%. So, like, when Ruin was at, like, that, it was already there. It was already at 200%. I believe Ruin and Undying was actually the meta back then. So when this came out, it was laughable. Because why the fuck would you want this when you could have Ruin instead? When Ruin doesn't have a cooldown, has enough consistency due to the Undying protection, and Pop to clean up in the late game along with corrupt intervention. Ruin being 200% regression was so much more desirable, and the synergy of the other 2 perks, and then like even as a cleanup perk in the late game, Pop outclassed it significantly. So there was absolutely no reason to run something like this at all. Especially with the 80-second cooldown there. That 80-second cooldown was ridiculous. So, needless to say, nobody ran this garbage. And that's pretty much how it always stayed. Because of that 80-second cooldown, and like, there was just so many better perks, the era of Pain Resonance being at 15% and had a tracking a condition, and then being up to 25% and still being very good, even when they kind of tried to rework it and change it a little bit. Call of Brine being 200% at one point also made this perk look like a fucking joke. Eruptions and Surge being still alright options. This perk was always outclassed in every way, shape, or form. However, the next big thing for this perk occurred in patch 7.50, where the 8 regression event meta showed up. Alrighty, and by this point, a couple things around it have also changed. Ruin has been long dead. Ruin's dead. Pop is still there. And we're still at a meta now. Again, this only set the stage for this perk. It did not help it yet. We are still at a meta right at this point where Pop is really good and Pain Rezo is good. And then if you labbed Eruption with that, you could Eruption in combination with those 2 perks. By the time a gem was at 8 regression events, you had already gotten so much value and you already had won the game, pretty much. So the 8 regression event meta didn't really do anything to kind of change this. It was just the initial groundwork for this perk. And why is that relevant? Because when they changed it, only the kick generator experiences a regression event. Only a kicked one. And now we are at the meta where we are now, where Pop Goes the Weasel has been nerfed. And so, well, why did it not survive? One thing that we know is that throughout all of these changes here, Eruption has survived. And Pain Rezo has also survived despite its nerf. Correct? what do those, and Ruin, honestly, Ruin wouldn't be too bad if it wasn't a hex. It wouldn't be too bad. What we know right now is that distance procs are really good. Okay? The ability to proc a generator from a distance and have it continually start regressing. Because it starts regressing. If you have a lot of pressure on the board, that value slowly adds up over time. And again, so like oppression is not, like this is not the backbone of an engine to destroy gens. That is not what this perk is. This perk is supplementary to other options that you have. And then again, what made this perk go up in value significantly is when they halved that fucking cooldown. That obnoxious 80-second cooldown in 8.1.0 was changed from 80 to 40. That means you can apply this perk a lot more. You basically can apply Ruin without it being on a hex. That's what Call of Brine used to do, Oppression kind of does now. But it affects more than one gen at a time. And there's no bonus progression to be gained. That extra 25% on a Call of Brine isn't worth it. Unless you're Nemesis who uses the perk for other things, aka the loud noise notifications to attract zombies. Correct? That's what Nemesis uses the perk for. And he doesn't use it for the 25% extra regression. He uses it for the loud noise notification. But if you can slap this perk on a killer, on an M2 killer or something, that can significantly help. Now again, there does that miss skill checks. I'm not even going, like, it does give them a difficult skill check. I'm not going to mention that aspect of the perk because that's not why you run it. Now again, if they're bad and they miss the skill checks, I can provide you some additional information. Or if you're a doctor, it could be a little better. But I think doctor needs all the chase perks in the world, so I don't think that's worth it. But it's like oppression. As you can see, this was the former gen control build, and as we discussed before, Pop is out. It did not survive, and so that's something like that can be coup de grace can replace Pop. If you're a chaser, or if you feel like you don't need a chase perk and you want to keep corrupt in there, that's when oppression can kind of come in here and be another supplementary engine here. And then oppression also can kind of, another thing that this perk can really be useful for is conserving those regression events. You look at the oppression and eruption synergy. You might think it's awkward at first because oppression can kind of like fly in the face of one of your regression events there. Like, but it's like, oh damn, or I can't apply eruption because oppression has been applied already. But here's the thing. You may not want to apply eruption every single time to a gen. Because remember, eruption can burn through regression events pretty quick. It can do that. If you can snack a generator and have it start regressing, and that's like kind of bonus value that you're getting. Because like if let's say a regenerator that you kick with oppression and eruptions on cooldown regresses for 30 seconds, that's all bonus value. That you didn't have to go over there and actually kick the generator. Right? That's all bonus value. That is, and then it's like if you kicked it with eruption, you'd be getting less value because you actually had to go kick it, and you also apply eruption, which again, if you already have control of the game, you don't need eruption to go off again and cause that extra 10% regression. The fact that oppression, the fact that if you have a lot of momentum and the generator that's regressing is still regressing, that saves you regression events. Oppression's niche in this role, like oppression's niche in this era of gen control, is the conservation of your regression events. By lowering the cooldown, they have actually allowed you to conserve regression events by using it more. That makes it have a very unique function in this meta. Now, I have always proclaimed that this perk should apply gen perks. They don't need to do that. Because of its unique place in this particular metagame, they don't need to give it that buff. They don't need to do that for oppression anymore. Now again, oppression, it is on the verge of making builds, because again, if you're an M1 killer, I don't think you run oppression simply because you need to maximize your lethality. If you were an extremely lethal killer like a Wesker or a like Knight or something, Knight's still okay. Like if you're or maybe a DC merchant could do this. Like if you were a killer that can reliably get downs to where like you say, I'm only gonna use coup de grace instead of needing play with your food. Or if you're a nemesis or a pyramid head, you don't have synergy with play with your food anyway. Or a bitch boy. If you're a bitch boy, you don't have play with your food synergy anyway. So, like, if you're a bitch boy, you want to use coup de grace, pain, res, eruption, and then maybe you throw out oppression there to maximize your gen control, correct? So that's kind of what oppression is doing right now. It's amazing how, like, a perk that was once laughingly horrible has a much bigger role just due to metagame shifts, changes in the base game, as well as one small buff. If this perk was the way it was now in the other metas, it still wouldn't be doing so hot. It's the fact that not only have you received so many nerfs, but the base game has been changed to the point where it actually has a different place in the meta, simply because of the 8 regression events has changed how gen control works just a little bit now that nerfs have come into play. Again, before the nerfs came into play, the perk still didn't have a place either, but that was also before its buff. If it might have a better place now, if it was in this state before, maybe you could take out corrupt and then just run all this, correct? So it's possible it might have replaced corrupt in other gen control builds as well, but it's just the little perk that could because again, back in the day this was awful. I even think here it says it's a C tier on this option here. Like, what's it say? Like sloppy butcher, like S. Like on this site's tier list, it's even described as C. It's a little bit better than a C tier perk now, but this also doesn't account for its buff. But again, it's the synergies, which we discussed before. It's a meta about synergy. The fact that oppression has actually a good, like, because it stops eruption from getting out of control in some situations, the perks actually work really well together, and I was very impressed by 2 perks that you don't think would have synergy. The fact that oppression can just go eruption, calm down a little bit. That can help conserve your events and make your patrols around the map much more efficient. The time that the perk saves you in your 1v4 game is much better now because you're not doing anything broken anymore. Like, again, when you were running around with 200% ruin, you would want to check every gem possible because you want to apply as much regression as you can. But in this day and age, the oppression's effect is much better, and it helps that they did shave off that cooldown. So I think that is, if you don't think that, because again it functions better than it reads. I must say that as well, because you know the perk's history and the perk's lack of viability in the past. It functions better when you're playing than it reads, because it still doesn't read good when you read it. Just let it do its thing in practice, and you'll see that it's actually all right. That all being said, I'm getting the hell out of here. GG's.